Trying to make a new video game, but you don't quite have the idea nailed down. Where do you begin? What we're looking at here is one of the things I developed, which was on the path towards the current game that I'm working on, Creeper World IXE. So we're going to look at some of the history that went into creating what will be the next game release. I'm going to wander around with my little avatar guy and let me speed it up.
I'm going to interrupt you here just
Okay.
right quick. I'm going to sort of do a synopsis. So what you were doing at this point in time is you just installed a new version of Unity that had several performance improvements. You were writing something to validate those on a very large type of terrain. And at the same time, you were looking at what happens with a large terrain. You were playing with the shadow and the darkness as well, right?
There's this little dude, and I'm using WASD keys to move him around in this world and uncovering a fog of war. And you see a terrain, which is just randomly textured here. You see an ocean, and you can see a little map in the lower right corner of the world as I explore it. And I'm trying to make my way to the top right corner of the map.
And that little world also gives you an idea of the scale of the entire map that you were exploring at the time.
Exactly. What you're looking at here is actually 3D geometry. It looks kind of flat right now, but there's actually an edge. Every one of these little sections of terrain is a chunk of 3D geometry with a texture on top of it. This is a little 3D model and it leans.
Talking about performance, this thing used to run at hundreds of FPS, and now I see, have you clicked it frame bound? There you go. Just show us what you can do with the FPS.
Now it's running faster. The game needs to render this geometry. It needs to render this terrain. It's got this giant array of memory and randomly filled it in with some Perlin noise to make some islands and some connected areas. It needs to put that on the screen so you can see it, but it can't render the entire thing. It's a huge world, and in fact the world could be 16 times or 32 times larger than this one. This is a small one, so it only needs to render what's on the screen. But as I move, new areas become visible, old areas go out. So it needs to dynamically destroy old geometry and create new geometry. There's also lighting. Now this lighting isn't done with GPU lighting. It's actually done with vertex lighting and geometry changes. So if I switch to make it get darker here, it appears to get darker. And if I drop a little light, you'll see each of the little squares of terrain and how they're lit up. So I change the vertex colors and use a shader in order to accomplish this type of lighting. So if I drop another light here, we've got that. I go and draw some walls. It blocks the light. I walk around up here and like make an area that's sort of filled in. If I can get in here and then drop a light inside here, the light lights up only the interior and spills out of that one open doorway. So all of this was done not with the intent of making this game that you're looking at, but as a mechanism for exploring new techniques, new ways of doing things that are higher performance, and at the same time exploring things that I hadn't explored before.
You've for a long time been sort of wanting to have pieces of a map integrate into a larger whole. And so this was part of that, and have the very large map. As just for reference, how many times is this larger than a Creeper World 4 terrain?
It's either 1K by 1K or 2K by 2K. I think it's 2K, 2048 by 2048.
So it's about 16 times bigger.
Right. So Creeper World 4 maps, what's its max?
256 by 256.
256 squared surface area.
So this is 16 times bigger.
Yeah,
so
linear.
You knew that you didn't have a performance problem in rendering that amount of terrain.
There's two things with the game, right? There is, well, at least two. One is, does it scale both performance and size-wise for what you need? But then what do you need? Too much space can be too bad in the Creeper World games. This became a technology exploration, and I ended up doing two other technology explorations after this before I settled the next game, this Creeper World IXE game. This game and the next two prototype exploration things, they all contributed something to Creeper World IXE. Some people do not work this way. So I can only speak for myself. This is how I like to work. I like to explore and look for something unique to base a game on.
So what would you say of this remains in IXE? Maybe you should flip back and show us a bit of IXE.
Yeah, let's do that. Here's X sitting inside Unity. The main thing I learned from TileTerrain was how to use some of the new Unity APIs to push stuff to the GPU. And I also got my feet wet with their jobs system and their burst compiler. It's really very nice. So this does not look like the thing we were just looking at. We're looking at a top view right now. I could paint some terrain here. This stuff is all simulated. It's not just background. Well, let's do this. Let's just jump down to a mission on a planet here where there's a side view. Oh, this is how I left it from the other day. There's creeper flowing. There's land and sand here where all of these individual pixels are simulated. Every little square here is sort of like a square in that tile terrain that we were looking at. When you deposit some stuff, some of this sand flows down, and there's just a multi-threaded simulation that's making that happen. Independent of that is this creeper simulation, which works in a similar way, but with completely different physics and rules. I'm on a world right now. I'm going to go back to orbit where I have these ships that move, and there's these planets in star systems, and there are multiple star systems to move between. And lots of animations to be added. One important difference between this and the other Creeper World games is that the top level menus in this aren't just about selecting the mission that you're going to play. The mission selector here is itself a mission. It can be. It might be empty. It might just be you fly up and make your way to a world, but there can be threats here that keep you from getting to where you might want to go. My favorite activity. For accidentally leaving the editor creeper button selected so that I put a unit and creeper in the same spot. This game, the intent anyway at this stage, is to support both top view and side view and different physics for each, and to allow missions to themselves to be mission loaders. Let me switch to us here so people can get a better look at us. I didn't know that I wanted to stay with sort of a Creeper World strategy type game, and there are elements in IXE that do deviate from that a little bit. One of the things I knew that I wanted to get back to was the idea of shorter, tighter missions. I don't mind that people use the games to make long form missions that last hours. That's great. That's awesome. But I also want to clearly be able to support a mission that is maybe only 5 or 10 minutes.
You also wanted some form of persistence, where every game up to now, every mission was a mission by itself. It stood alone. It had no integration with other missions. But you really did want to somehow have a sense of persistence and something that carries over.
Exactly. So short missions, but a long arc. That little bit that you play is part of a bigger whole. You've been building this fleet, you've been building this economy, you've been building these upgrades and these resources, and they're applied in this large universe that you're exploring. It also gets away from the idea that there's these 20 missions and they form the story arc, and you sit down and you burn through them, and then you think you're done with the game, except for the random content and the custom content. It's this idea that there is this larger area for you to explore and find things in and do things in, and it's not just a hard-coded 20 scripted missions.
If there's any form of competitiveness, one is always concerned that it makes it easier to hack a persistent advantage into the game for one player versus other players.
So my philosophy on this game is, for better or worse, I'm going at it single player first attitude.
And I think this is where I talk to you, and I think what you've kind of adopted is to say that you would look at in IXE to open everything that you do to populate maps is going to be available for map makers, and therefore that you could then encapsulate galaxies or spaces so that it doesn't transfer between those.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, an expansive space might consist of a single planet with a single mission around a single star, and the author of that might start you with some stuff already. It's up to them. That's sort of the simplest possible case. And that's really the equivalent of a Creeper World 4 custom map or a Creeper World 3 or a Particle Fleet custom map. On the other hand, there might be a series of missions and worlds surrounding different stars where the worlds themselves are missions, and then there's ground missions, and there might even be randomly generated missions mixed in with handcrafted scripted missions. All of that exists within that region, that expansive space. I've not done this, so this is a hope, not a no, but a hope at this point, that people will be able to do what I just explained, create these worlds on these missions, is because that's what I intend to do in order to deliver the core experience of the game. So it's the next level of user-generated content for the Creeper World game. There is Steam Workshop and related APIs for managing content. That may help provide a mechanism by which one or a group of individuals can manage and maintain their content over time. Because if people do what I do, they may not make just one or two missions. I mean, they literally could make dozens of missions that are, or even hundreds of missions that are integrated together in a universe, and they may maintain them over time. I sort of view my job at this point as working out game mechanics, providing as much ammunition as I can in a package in an environment, along with a campaign and an expanse experience that uses all that, and that's the game that I deliver.
This is probably a good time for you to sort of consider maybe casting off for this one.
Game IXE, prototype, TileTerrain, Pixel. Thumbs up. That's it.